we have a great session coming up. I'm just going to read some of this title first, and then I'll welcome the speakers on. Marine conservation, women in marine conservation, and how everyone can help protect our oceans home. So we have Christine Figgener, I hope I pronounced that right, and Melissa Marquez, I hope I pronounced that right. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But I want to give you each both a chance to introduce yourself and talk about your work, and then I'll let you take it from there.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. I'm just going to say, oh, Melissa is online as well. Hi, Melissa. Yeah, so as he already said, perfectly pronounced, my name is Christine Figgener, and I am actually right now in Costa Rica, so I hope my connection is okay enough that you can hear me, because that's not always a given. I have been working with sea turtle conservation for the past 13 years. And yeah, I would love to tell you more in this session about marine conservation, and also how important it is to work with local communities to actually accomplish our conservation goals. And I have my amazing co-host, Melissa Marquez, who's actually from from South America, right? So she is also a conservation biologist, and I think she can probably present herself better than I can.
Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Marquez. Thank you so much for having me. I also hope my internet connection is stable, because I'm on the other side of the world. I'm in Australia, so it's your guys' Saturday. It is my Sunday. And yeah, I'm excited to talk a little bit more about the research that I do as well. So I study sharks, which sometimes eat sea turtles, but I'm really happy to be here. And just talk a little bit about the research. One thing that I think is good for us to mention is that we speak Spanish as well. So we're very happy to kind of talk about our research in another language, just to be a bit more inclusive in this event. And I have a few slides as well that are both in English and in Spanish. So let me know if you need those.
Yeah, maybe if there's anybody that would prefer Spanish over English, maybe you can type that in the chat box, so we know for sure that we can do it bilingual. If not, we probably can just go as it comes right now. Yeah, I don't know. I have prepared a little film to introduce myself as well, and I'm just going to try to show it right now. Let me see if I can share the screen. Oops.
Perfect. Yeah, we can see it.
I think I always wanted to be a scientist that does conservation especially, but I think now I have this incredible platform that I really don't want to let go of. And I hope, of course, I will be the one that's providing the data, but I'm also hoping that I will be the one that will be communicating my science to the public. In between my master's and studying at A&M, I actually lived in Costa Rica for quite a while, about 8 years, where I did conservation work on marine turtles. So the Marine Biology Interdisciplinary graduate program is fairly new, so it's only a few years old. And of course, the majority of people that apply to the program would rather stay at the coast in Galveston or Corpus Christi. So there's not that many people here on campus that do study marine biology. 4.4 kilograms. When I was conducting my first season of research for my PhD work, we were capturing turtles and brought them onto a boat. And when we had this one particular male on the boat, we were also sampling little critters that live on turtles, parasites and others. And we found something encrusted in the nose of that particular male. Tell me, you are afraid. So I cut up a piece, and my local sister bit on it. It was plastic. So yes, that was how we found out it was a plastic straw that was lodged into the turtle's nose.
I'm sorry, little one. I think you like it better afterwards, though.
When I had the video in my hand, I really wanted to publish it and show the world what I had seen, because for me this is a reality, but not so much for all the other people out there. So I knew that I'm conducting research with Texas A&M University, and I needed to run it by my advisor to just know what she thinks and if she would back me up or whatever happens after. But she also believed that we really need to show the world the realities of plastic and what kind of harm it can do to wildlife. And so we published it as is. And then this video happened, and that video provided me and still provides me with a platform that is beyond of what I would have ever imagined. Of course, I also get more opportunities to talk to the next generation. So I've been on a bunch of panels with the next generation STEM, especially with girls. So I always like to talk to them and give them ideas of what they can do to become a biologist or scientist. I think I always wanted to be a scientist.
Okay, stop sharing. Yeah, so that's a little intro to what my claim to fame is, and maybe Melissa wants to tell a little bit more about her claim to fame, because I think she has a really cool one as well.
Yeah, I'll be happy to. I do not have a video, but I have a quick little PowerPoint to share. So just give me one quick second and I'll share the screen. So as how it's been said, so Christina Marquez, I am a shark scientist. I'm from Puerto Rico and Mexico, and some of my first memories were actually at the beach. So I've always been drawn to the ocean. I've always loved being near the ocean. And specifically, I've always had a fascination with the misunderstood animals, especially sharks and their relatives, which are collectively known as the Chondrichthyans, but basically they're the sharks, the skates, the rays, and the chimaeras. I have traveled all over the world doing shark science, from Belize to South Africa, New Zealand, and now currently I am in Perth, Western Australia, doing my PhD. In the meantime of doing that, I have been a podcast host for a marine science podcast called ConCiencia Azul, which is where I talk about marine conservation problems in a Spanish setting, just because I do believe that we need to have these conversations about conservation in multiple languages. As well as I've been a TV presenter for Shark Week from Discovery Channel twice. I've been on National Geographic. My work's been featured in BBC Women's Top 100, on National Geographic again, on quite a few different outlets. I am a freelance writer for Forbes, for Science Forbes, and I'm also a children's author book. Or children's book author, there we go. It's still too early for me and I haven't had my coffee. So basically, I do quite a lot of things. I have quite a lot of hats, but the main thing that I do is I am a marine biologist. For those who are bilingual, that's kind of the gist of things in Spanish. But yeah, I've been really lucky to have the platform that I do have, just because when I was growing up, I didn't kind of see myself in the lineup of shark scientists. So when you think of a shark scientist, you normally don't think of someone like me. I never saw any female shark scientists growing up, let alone Latina marine biologists. So I didn't really know if I was there, if I was able to actually do the job, because I never saw anyone like me. So I am a big proponent of you can't be what you can't see, as well as diversity does not equal inclusion. I do believe we need to have both parts of that equation in order for us to have a more balanced science industry. So a little bit more about my work. So I currently look at shark habitat use, basically figuring out why sharks are where they are using two types of technology, baited remote underwater video cameras, or BRUVs. Essentially, they're just fancy GoPros that you put on the bottom of the ocean somewhere, not too deep. Usually they're pretty shallow, and they have a little bait bag or like a treat bag to lure animals in to get a little bit closer so I could take their pictures via the video camera. I also use drones, which kind of just gives me a wider photo of what's kind of around that the bruv won't be able to see. So I use those bruvs and those drones to study their habitat use and figure out why they use specific parts of their habitat more than other parts. On the flip side, I also do social sciences, and I look at how our perception of sharks has actually changed over the years and how our attitudes toward sharks actually sways conservation initiatives. So are they successful or are they unsuccessful because of how we think about these animals? And again, you've got the translated PowerPoint slide there. So I am in the thick of my PhD right now. I was supposed to be out doing field work right now, actually, but due to COVID-19, I am not able to, and to be honest, don't know when I will be able to. But I'm still super excited to be doing quite a lot of my work remotely, which I still can do, which is great, and continue writing, talking to people about sharks, why they matter, and why the people who study them matter as well. So that's kind of a little bit spiel on me. But yeah, I think
I will. Am I gone?
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, no, okay. Yeah, I was going to talk a little bit about the details of how I became a marine conservation biologist as well. So I, of course, wasn't born one. And I actually, the funny thing is that I grew up in a landlocked area in Germany. So just as, you know, Melissa couldn't envision herself maybe becoming a marine biologist, that was something similar, just because it wasn't the area that I grew up in. It was known for coal mining. And I'm not sure what you're seeing right now, but let's see. All right. Yeah, so like I said, I was born in Germany. The little red dot right here, that is where I grew up. So a few hours away from the coast. The area was really known for coal mining. It wasn't very pretty. And the only saving grace was really that I had parents that loved vacationing at the ocean. And because of that, I was really early, at least during the summers, on the ocean. And my dad loved the ocean as well. There are a lot of water sports. And that is how I, at least in my mind, wanted to become an ocean explorer. But I didn't really have a name, didn't know, that you can make a career out of it, up until I started interning for an aquarium in Germany. And there I was exposed to other marine biologists. And all of a sudden I had an idea, wow, you can actually make a living with ocean exploration. And yeah, this is how I decided that I want to study biology, which I did. I did study in Germany for my bachelor's, actually drug biology, and then was going to go to the University of Hamburg to study marine biology, but I studied under an old degree system that wasn't accepted by that university anymore. So, talking about setbacks in life, I was totally devastated, because ever since I was like 10 years old, that was the university that I wanted to go to get a master's. But then I decided that, what, doesn't matter what I study, it really matters only where I will end up applying the basic concepts in biology to. And so I went to University of Würzburg and studied animal ecology and behavioral physiology. And it was during that time that I had the chance for the first time to go to Costa Rica for a few months to work in a project for leatherback turtles. So leatherback turtles are the largest of all sea turtle species. They're really massive, weighing about 300 to 600 kilograms. I'm really bad in pounds. It's large. And yeah, I was totally hooked. When I saw my first leatherback nesting, I decided, okay, this is the animal species, the system that I would want to study for the rest of my life, pretty much. And so I moved to Costa Rica, pretty much right. I was not entirely done with my master's yet after I had collected my data, because I also did my master thesis in Costa Rica. And then I started working there for several years on both coastlines, because Conveniently, Costa Rica has the Pacific coast and the Caribbean coast, and leatherbacks nest on both sides. And they also don't nest at the same time. So I literally was able to work for 6 months on the Caribbean side and then move over to the Pacific, work for 6 months, and went back and forth for quite a few years. And I probably would have kept on doing that for a really long time if not something really sad would have happened. And that was that one of my friends and colleagues was killed at one of the nesting beaches in Costa Rica. And that gave me a big pause about how impacted, actually, I've been pretty much dedicating my entire life at that point to trying to protect turtles in Costa Rica and studying and learning more about them so we can even, protect them better. And that was really the moment where I thought, okay, I need to think about how else I can become more impactful. And given that I lived at that point in a Latino country where unfortunately sometimes, especially in the rural areas, the gender roles are still very, very machista. I sometimes had a pretty hard stand as a foreigner. I speak Spanish, but it's very obvious that I'm a foreigner. I don't, I look different as well. And even though I, of course, try to immerse myself in the culture, there was always this, this little bit of disadvantage that I had. And so I decided that I need to go back to school and get my PhD so that I would be able to be pretty much independent as a scientist, that I wouldn't have to depend on other companies, institutions, other men that tell me what to do and how to do my job. And yeah, so I contacted a professor in the US at Texas A&M, and that is where you saw the video about. That is what I pretty much did in the past year. So I'm just a little bit ahead of Melissa, and I can tell you it feels great, Melissa, once you're done. Just keep hanging on. It's really all about that. Yeah, and I have, in the time while I was at A&M, was also able to fund my own nonprofit organization in Costa Rica. It's called COAS, Costa Rican Alliance for Sea Turtle Conservation and Science. And the main objective of that organization is, first of all, pretty much a state have a massive issue with what I call, the white savior complex, that we people from the Western countries come into developing countries and feel we know everything better and need to tell people in the country how to protect and govern their own natural resources. And I think that is totally the wrong approach. But what I do want to change, though, is the culture about gender. So I'm trying really hard to get local women especially involved in the stewardship of natural resources, trying to help and build up female scientists from the country, because I would love to see that most conservation projects in the future in Costa Rica actually run by Costa Ricans and not by foreigners like myself. So yeah, that is pretty much the whole story about that. And I have to mention that as well. Recently in April, I got another really great opportunity. So as you've heard, I am also really vocal about the whole issue around plastic pollution, which I don't really want to talk too much about today. But because of my advocacy around it, I actually was offered a job with the Footprint Foundation in the United States, which is trying to convince or trying to educate consumers and children and on how to become better consumers, make good choices, and make them understand that really every dollar you're spending, you are voting with. And so you can really enact change with that. Yeah, so that is how I became a marine conservation biologist. And maybe, wait a second, why can I not go forward? Oh, there's a lot more on this slide, I guess. And yeah, what I usually do in my everyday life is, my specialty or my expertise is population biology. So what we do is we monitor different sea turtle populations to figure out how many there actually are. So I work with nesting females as well as with foraging or feeding sea turtles, because unfortunately it's really easy to access the nesting females because they come onto the beach. but they still spend most of their time in the water after they're done nesting. And we also have younger life stages that are living in Costa Rican waters that we pretty much know absolutely nothing about. And so I'm applying satellite tracking techniques to follow the turtles through their journeys in the ocean. And with those data, I'm able to pretty much inform the government. Right now, for example, we're working on a new conservation management plan that will include for the first time also management suggestions for in-water, sea turtles in water, because we are identifying hotspots of sea turtle presence around Costa Rica. And here you can just see different things that I'm doing. You can see myself here gluing a satellite transmitter onto a sea turtle carapace. Then we also use radio transmitters to follow different turtles throughout their nesting season. There you actually have to use an antenna to find them again. And what I don't show here is another technique that I'm using is called stable isotope analysis, where you take little samples from skin and carapace to figure out what turtles are feeding on. Yeah, that is pretty much my life as a sea turtle biologist. And I pass it on to Melissa.
Well, actually, I think you brought up quite a lot of interesting points that I would love to talk to you more about, just because I think they're very pertinent to what's happening nowadays. So both you and I have kind of talked about how we didn't see ourselves in the lineup of what a scientist was, especially a marine scientist. And that's something that I actually gave a TEDx talk about, is having more women featured in multimedia and different platforms showing themselves as a marine scientist, just because, again, representation does matter, and you can't be what you can't see, sort of thing. But it's interesting that it kind of transcends different cultures, because for me as a Latina, I never saw myself there, because as you said, the Hispanic and Latino community can still very much be very machismo, which, if you don't know what that means, essentially it is very much still a sexist kind of culture where a lot of people still do believe that the women don't belong in the work field, that they belong at home, they belong in the kitchen. I mean, those are comments that I've had told by my own culture. Thankfully, no one in my family, but I've had people around myself who are part of my culture who say, why are you a scientist? Why aren't you at home providing a family and whatnot? So it's interesting to see that kind of idea of a woman not being a scientist does transcend different cultures. But something that you talked about real quickly was parachute science. And that's something I don't think that we talk about enough in science, is when people come in, they do the research in a specific locale. Quite a lot of times it can be in Central America or South America or Africa. They do the research and then they leave with the research results, so the people in that area never actually learn about what science was done in their own backyard, which I think is really important to have. For those who are listening right now, did you know what parachute science was? Did you even know that was a term, and that's something that actually still happens today? Because it is something that is quite important, and it's something that kind of ties into science literacy and science advocacy. For myself, I am a big advocate for being scientifically literate. And essentially what that means is you having a basic understanding of science, not only just in general, but also your own local science. So what's happening in your backyard, be it a terrestrial area or a marine area. So you can make better informed decisions for every aspect of your life, be it personal decisions, such as what seafood am I going to eat today, or what meat am I going to eat today, if I'm going to do either of those things, to just overall global and more impactful kind of decisions, such as voting. Who am I going to vote for? What do they stand for and whatnot? So I'd love to talk a little bit more kind of about parachute science and moving forward as we're trying to make this industry a bit more inclusive and diverse. And opening more of a conversation between BIPOCs, which includes Black, Indigenous, people of color, and your traditional Western science as well. I think it'd be really interesting to kind of see what you saw in Costa Rica with that kind of scenario.
Yeah, I have to say that First of all, when I arrived, I remember, especially when I started being in charge of projects and also having then, of course, pretty much just locals that were working with me, that there was a general mistrust for the sheer fact of that I was a white biologist and for the experiences that they had with white biologists before me. And so it was very clear that, they thought that we are know-it-alls, that we pretty much just come in for one season and we're leaving, we're not there for the long term. And when I started, and I'm not going to say names, but when I started my PhD, I actually had a professor, which was not my main advisor, but we were talking about how I will collect data, because I was actually not just collecting at one beach, but I was collecting on the entire coast of the Pacific. So I needed to go into onto beaches that already had an existing project. And I'm very, very conscious of, that I'm not stepping on anybody's toes, because I think, when you have somebody that is already doing something, I don't need to come in and reinvent anything. So I always wanted to go and ask them if that's okay. Even though I had a permit, I could have gone in. But his approach was just like, what do you care about it? You just go in and you leave, and you need your data. That's all you need to care about. And I feel this is first of all, it was a male, it was a white scientist. And I think this is a very, very common aspect that I have seen even discussed in front of me, because they automatically assume I am part of, their inner circle just because I have the same skin color, when they talk badly about locals, for example. So if you know anything about sea turtle conservation, especially in Latin America, it is mainly locals that do all the main lifting of the hard work. So these are the people that spending their entire night on the beach every single night. And it's a hard work. It's physical. You don't sleep enough. And they don't just do it for one season. They do it for decades. And they don't just do it once a year. Even they sometimes do 2 seasons. And then you go to the conferences. And I was actually shocked the first time I went to the International Sea Turtle Conference that it was dominated by white males talking about the data that was collected by locals and how they talked about local participation. It was always the turtle taggers. And when I told them, for example, about how my data was taken, I said, well, you can't trust them. They're not scientists, And I think that really aggravated me, just because it's bullshit. I mean, what do we pretend? It's not rocket science what we're doing. We like to think it just because we studied for it, but in the end, it's not rocket science. And it is really this neo-colonistic idea of, governing natural resources that are part of a developing country that really, pisses me off. And I don't want to be part of that anymore.
Yeah, that's great. And that's definitely something that we see kind of in the shark world as well. And I think just in any kind of like science industry where you have to work with the natural environment and whatnot. Sorry for the screaming you hear in the background. It's not a person, it's a bird. That's Australia, it's just birds screaming. But yeah, so a lot of science industries do have this kind of mindset of you come in, you do the work, and then you leave. And it has kind of created a bit of a distrust between scientists. And I don't say that as in saying they're not real scientists. It's just the science industry in general, and the rest of the population. And I think that's where a lot of the distrust has kind of come between the general public, and scientists it's something that a lot of people have said, the white ivory tower. So they think we're kind of above them, that we never share our science. And it's true, because, you not only shoot science, but then the mere act of we publish research in journals that you have to pay for. The average person can't pay for those kind of subscriptions, let alone be able to see any of your work. So unless you do some sort of outreach, you get your research out there in other ways outside of just a publication, a lot of people don't hear about your sometimes very vital and very important work. So I think that's something that as we kind of take a really good, hard look at science, we need to try to make it more inclusive, more open, not just to other people of different backgrounds, to join in on the conversation, join this table that we've kind of created and only have allowed some people to go into. But we need to just bang the whole entire door wide open, and allow everyone to kind of be a part of science. Just because I think it will kind of help it will help repair the bonds essentially that we've kind of severed. which I think is really important. So Chris, for you, what's one question that you get quite a lot as a marine scientist? Like, what's the most asked question that you get about being a marine scientist who studies sea turtles, or just a marine scientist in general?
I think it's probably the question of why do I like working with sea turtles so much, or why do I think it's so different, for example, than working with sharks? And I always have to think, and maybe you can answer it for sharks, like why you like studying sharks so much. Because it's funny, I didn't set out to study marine biology to study the sea turtles, I have to say that. So sea turtles only became a thing for me once I went to Costa Rica, but my love as a teenager, when everybody else was looking for boy bands, I actually loved humpback whales. So I was totally fascinated by their songs, and I really wanted to study, their songs pretty much. That was kind of the idea I had for my future career, going all over the world, recording humpback whale songs and then analyzing them. And in the meantime, I actually have worked with humpback whales as well. So I'm the co-founder of a cetacean organization in Costa Rica as well, and worked for several years on the humpback and dolphin project. And I have to say, it is a totally different kind of work. So with sea turtles, I don't think there is much that is so hands-on on such a large animal that you don't have to sedate and don't even necessarily always have to catch even. I mean, the in-water study, of course, we're catching them, but especially if you're working with nesting females, it just permits you to be with them for, the time that they spend on the beach. You get to, be able to take a lot of samples, be right with them, observe them, and then they go their way. And I think this is just like this fascination that doesn't cease to exist for me. It's, it's I don't know, smelling their breath, seeing them breathing, doing their thing, and nothing of that. I didn't have to inject any kind of sedative for that. I think I really like that.
Yeah, for me, studying sharks, I mean, kind of like how I said earlier, it's always been a fascination with the misunderstood predators. So, I mean, I like everything from wolves and eagles, like birds of prey, to sharks. But I think sharks always were kind of the most charismatic for me. And for those who don't know, there's actually over 500 different species of sharks, and we are still to this day discovering new species. And so that to me is really exciting, knowing that we don't know the full picture of these animals, and even the most famous of sharks, such as great white sharks or whale sharks. We still actually have really big gaps in our knowledge about them. Like, we don't know where they go to breed and give birth. We have ideas, but no concrete proof just yet. So I think that's probably one of the most exciting bits about my science, is that I still continue to learn and learn new things about these animals, which is amazing. But one question that I get a lot as well is, okay, I'm not a shark scientist. How can I help the ocean? And even from the middle of nowhere, like, you can be in the smack dab middle of your continent, nowhere surrounded by water, and actually your decisions, what you choose to do every day, can actually impact the ocean. And I think that's something that a lot of people kind of forget about. One of the things that I kind of use for sharks, for example, where everyone can kind of help them out, because 31% of sharks and rays are actually threatened with extinction. So one of the things that I tell people is, if you have a smartphone, download a seafood sustainability app. So I'll kind of show you the one that I've got here. Since I'm in Australia, we have something that's called Good Fish. And Good Fish essentially allows me, when I'm out eating seafood, which is very, very rare. But if I want to eat seafood, I can actually download the app, look at the choices that I want, and be like, okay, this tuna, it's not sustainably caught. It's really, really high in these kind of things. So there's quite a lot of different apps that you can choose to make better seafood choices. Someone actually just said Seafood Watch app from Monterey Bay Aquarium. Yes, it's one of my favorites. Actually a link so everyone can kind of see a few different seafood sustainability apps that are around the world that my program, the FinGenet Initiative, has actually looked into and kind of vetted and said, yes, these are really good ones. But I'll give you kind of a quick peek right there. So at the finger, right there at your fingertips. You can see that there's better choices, eat less, and say no. You can go to them and then you can kind of see which are, what's harder? There we go. You can see which are good choices, which are bad choices. It tells you a little bit about the animal that you're eating. And that's, I think, a better way for people to kind of get an idea of what exactly it is that they're ingesting. One thing I think that we kind of feel disconnected from is the whole entire wildlife and food chain process. And what I mean by that is you're not out there most of the time hunting for these animals. So for you, you don't really see the impact that one fish can actually have. But your one fish comes from millions and millions and trillions of tons of fish that have been caught in one area, which most of the times those areas are overfished. And that's actually one of the biggest threats that sharks face is overfishing and bycatch. So yeah, that's one easy way that people can kind of help the oceans right off the bat is make better seafood choices. Chris, do you have any kind of recommendations for people in regards to helping sea turtles or any other animals?
Yeah, for us, I mean, definitely bycatch is a problem just as it is for sharks as well. For sea turtles, we don't have as many species. So we have 7 species of sea turtles only. But all of them are actually listed by on the red list, except of the flatback from Australia that is data deficient. So it is likely probably also at least vulnerable or endangered. But yes, the other biggie that we have for sea turtles is actually plastic pollution, and that's the reason why I've been so vocal about it. And it is also something that really everybody can do something at home. So it's really about us rethinking our choices that we have for what kind of single-use plastics are we using and what do we really not need to use. So straws, cutlery, especially right now in the COVID time, takeout food. I know that at least here in Costa Rica, I'm not so sure if that's always the case, but Uber Eats, for example, actually has an option where you can, it's actually the default here that you don't get cutlery unless you ask for it. And they have a little eco button that shows you which restaurants are using non-plastic containers for your takeout. So that is definitely a great thing. If not in the US, while I was in the US, I always had a list of restaurants that I already knew that don't use plastic, so for example, as takeout. But another big thing, of course, is food wrapping. So food wrapping is actually one of the biggest portions of plastic pollution. And it usually is a little bit more inconvenience to figure out how to buy food without plastic wrapping. And it really depends on the country that you live in, what is available. So of course, farmers markets are a great way to just go with your own containers to buy produce. Then we have, especially in Europe, we have a lot of unpacked markets nowadays. So that means any kinds of rice, seeds that usually come in plastic, you can get in bulk. So that means you bring your own container, you weigh it in, and then you just fill your own container with all those things. And I've seen popping it up in the US as well, and here in Costa Rica as well. So that means you might have to investigate a little bit in the beginning, but once you figured out where you can get your stuff, you are really able to reuse your plastic footprint. And of course, the other thing, and I think I've just really quickly mentioned it in my introduction, you are pretty much voting with your dollars. So I always encourage people to definitely shun big businesses that are doing the wrong thing. So if they are really absolutely unwilling to change any of their practices, I think they don't deserve to have you as a customer. And I know there's so many smaller businesses that are trying really hard. You know, I don't mind if people try to make money. I mean, everybody has to live off something, but I think you can still make money while you're also having sustainable practices. And that is, you know, about food wrapping, all kinds of things. So yeah, just always think of before you spend money, where you're spending your money, because you are creating the demand, and it's literally basic economics. The demand will pretty much define the supply. So if you don't buy it, nobody will produce it in the end. That is, I think, the other thing. And it really doesn't matter where you live. Believe me, every river leads into the ocean. So if you have a landfill that's, you know, next flood, next rain, animals that carry the plastics and your sewage drains, even if you don't believe it, your plastic still has a chance to make its way into the ocean. So, and maybe into the stomach of a sea turtle. That is, yeah, of course, another really, really big thing that everybody should consider. But you know what, Melissa, I actually have a question for you that I'm really curious about, because you are a shark scientist, and of course, Shark Week, I don't know, I've actually seen some stats kind of going back to, women in science right now. I don't know how many female scientists were featured last time. It was still, I think,
It was very low. It was very low.
Tiny percentage. And I sometimes follow different conversations on the social media platforms, and I think Shark Week is probably one of the biggest thing is this bro culture, that is very, which I find immediately excludes women, because we just are not bros. And it's this kind of, the ball is passed from one male to the other, and it totally ignores the fact that we exist as well. So any thoughts about that, like your experiences with that? I'm really curious.
Yeah, so unlike kind of what you see on TV where it's mostly guys with sharks, actually there's quite a lot of women who work with sharks. It is actually a dominant, like a female dominant industry, even though you don't really see that on the TV. For me, both times that I've worked with Shark Week, it's been great, but I have been one of the only women, if not the only woman, who has been on that kind of, who's been in that kind of TV kind of setting. And so I think it's really interesting in that, kind of how I say it to a lot of people is that Shark Week isn't for shark scientists. It is for people who want to see those dramatic recreations of shark bites. They want to see everything hyped up. And that's why you see the same sharks over and over again, because they're the most charismatic of them, essentially. So I think it's really interesting to kind of just see what actual shark research is out there and what is portrayed on TV. For example, you've got Shark Week, which is one of the most longest running TV specials, I guess, in the United States cable. But also National Geographic has something that's called Shark Fest. Shark Fest is similar to Shark Week in that it shows a lot of shark content, but from a different spin almost in a way. So I think it's really interesting of who tunes into what, and I don't have access to that kind of data to figure out, all right, this percentage of the population and this kind of factors, like are they male, are they female, what age groups are they, what backgrounds are they in, where are they located. It's really interesting, or I think it would be really interested to see what that kind of demographic is made up of. But regardless of that, I think it's really important to know that people get a lot of their information from Shark Week. So yes, there is a lot of science in there, but there's a lot of hooey baloney sometimes, we'll say it that way. A few years ago, they came under fire for coming up with what's called a mockumentary, so not a real documentary, saying that a very, very extinct shark, Megalodon, was still alive. And a lot of scientists vocally, and rightly so, said, this isn't right. You're stoking this kind of hysteria about this giant shark still roaming our oceans when it's just not true. And the science shows that it's just not true. So I think there's a fine line between entertainment, but also actually getting scientific information out there. Not all shark science is what you see on TV that's super gutsy and punchy and yeah, we're going to go out and tag these sharks and whatnot. A big misconception that people have about shark science is that we're constantly out in the ocean, and that's not true. We do have a lot of shark science that happens right behind a computer screen. Once you go out into the field, you do have to analyze all that data, and it takes usually twice, if not 3 times longer to figure out what story you're telling with all of that information that you've gotten. So sometimes take things with a grain of salt that you see on TV in regards to sharks. And that's kind of just the overall gist of things is, sharks have a pretty bad rap and the media doesn't help. You've got words that are used to describe otters, and they usually have really bad connotations, but shark bites are very, very rare. Unfortunately, the number of shark bites that will happen in our world will probably go up as our population increases and as more people go to the oceans. But, that is something that people kind of have to keep into the back of their mind. Not as many people get up in arms about someone going out into the middle of the savannah and getting bitten by a lion because they're like, oh, that was where the lion lives, of course. But I feel like a lot of people have this mindset of the ocean is ours, this bit of the ocean is ours, it should be safe, but that's not the case. There isn't really any barriers to keep animals away from a habitat that has been actually rightfully theirs for a lot longer than it has been ours. There's quite a lot of mitigation strategies there to protect bathers, such as shark exclusion nets, which are different from shark nets. Shark exclusion nets have much smaller mesh, so no animals can get in them, unlike shark nets, which do have bigger mesh and actually allows for a lot of animals to get stuck. So it's, I think, something that a lot of people, as we continue to progress with our technology and our science, a lot of people are kind of going to go more into the mindset of, okay, how can we coexist with these animals? Because I think that's the point that we need to get to. It's not this is my bit, this is your bit. It's how do we coexist with them, but still have a good time as well. And thankfully, we have seen everything from exclusionary nets to now a lot of people actually use drones, or even South Africa is a great example of this, shark spotters. You have people actually physically up on hills on top of the beaches looking for sharks, and if there are sharks there, there is a flag system to let you know kind of the degree of risk to get out, to stay in. So I think it's a very tedious kind of relationship that we have with sharks, and one that I hope we continue to better.
Yeah, I think one important thing, hey Bailey, one important thing that I think is what you just said again, is like we don't actually see on television maybe the accurate representation of like gender in science. So I think it's really important. I actually had a really heated discussion with that on social. One man told me that, because I asked him like, how many female wildlife presenters do you actually, for example, know? And he said, well, it is because people don't want to hear a woman explaining things to us. And I said, okay. But it also means that, there is young girls out there in the audience that believe that there is no female shark biologist, or there is no female sea turtle biologist. So I think this needs to change. And I'm really kind of tired of this bro culture. And I think the men also need to realize that this is not the way of how we need to go into the next years. So yeah, with that, I think we're almost at the end of the session. We have 5 minutes. I don't know if there's any questions. I couldn't see one right now.
Yeah, we got some questions that I wanted to ask both of you from both of our friends at YouTube, watching on the YouTube stream, but also here in the chat. But I mean, I think I can speak for a lot of us that I look up to both of you immensely, but I wanted to know, and the people in the chat want to know, who do you guys look up to? Who are some other women, explorers, conservationists, scientists, just rad women that you both look up to, that you can maybe shine a light on during this time, and we can give them a follow as well?
Well, actually, it's really funny. So, and it's not even really well known. So there is a German-speaking Jacques Cousteau, or was a German-speaking Jacques Cousteau. His name was Hans Hess. You look him up, H-A-N-S, like Hans, like a typical German name. He's actually from Austria, though, or was from Austria. And he was, I think, even a little bit before Jacques Cousteau, one of the first people that did underwater videography. But the interesting thing is, it wasn't so much that he did films about himself, but he had a wife, Lotte, that was pretty much the center of his films. And I think that was one thing that I thought that was so cool, because for me, that was really the idea, okay, there is this female ocean explorer that I can aspire to. And I think that has given me, especially as a kid, a lot of motivation to just go for that. And of course, like the other big person in my life is Jane Goodall. Like, I think she is like one of the most amazing human beings, probably. I have never met her, and I hope I will one day, but yeah. I've read her book. I think I read the translation German. I think it was In the Shadow of Men, like one of her early books that I got in like a library sale. And yeah, really, yeah, it was great. That was like my two main people.
Yeah, I think for me, some of the biggest role models that I've had was Dr. Eugenie Clark, who kind of set the stage for women in shark science, but also probably Sylvia Earle. She is known as her deepness, and she has done everything and anything for the oceans. So she's definitely one of my biggest role models as well. But funnily enough, the person who actually got me into marine conservation and just wildlife conservation in general was David Attenborough. And I know that a lot of people have actually got him to kind of thank for being in this sphere and kind of being motivated for it. He is, definitely one of my biggest inspirations. He is the next one I want to meet. I have been really lucky to meet Eugenie Clark. Hopefully one day I'll get to meet Sylvia Earle, and the day I meet David Attenborough, I will cry very happily.
I think I would cry on that day if I were able to meet David Attenborough as well. But that, I just have one comment to make. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Speaking about previously, Christine, what you had mentioned, really making sure the scientists are the ones who get the credit when we talk about things like Shark Week. I would love to hear both of your thoughts on a show called Extinct or Alive, but that is a conversation for a different day. But again, thank you both so much for joining us. Bailey, do you see if we have any other questions before we move on to the next one?
I thought I saw one more question, but honestly, you both asked each other such good questions that most of them are taken. I saw a couple asking, what made you get into shark-specific research and working with sharks and turtles. You guys sailed through that naturally, so I'm not seeing anything that you both have not answered, which is great. That's a sign of a good session.
Christine, you're muted.
So yeah, I just hope that I'm actually going to get to meet Melissa in person one day. So I hope.
Oh my God, I know it'd be so nice.
If you ever come to Costa Rica, let me know.
Same thing with Australia.
Oh, I wish.
I just wanted to say thank you for you guys for hosting this as well. This has been so informative. I've loved watching all of the different speakers talk and have this, this collective moment of learning, which I think is really nice to have some really important conversations, but kind of also just disconnect from everything that's happening around the world and just enjoy learning.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you guys both again so much for joining us. Really, really awesome to be able to talk to you. Yeah.